Hey, this is Todd. Wanted to do a quick video to talk about something that came up in my home game, which illustrated an issue and solution that I thought might be handy for other folks out there, so I thought I would share it. Essentially, I had to have a talk with one of my players in my game this past week. Now, it wasn't, and that makes it sound ominous, it wasn't a talk as in, sorry, you have to leave because you're not a good fit or we're not getting along or anything like that. But it's one of those talks that you have to have every once in a while when you have to address something that's come up either in your setting, your style, your house rules, or the core rules to set and reset and make sure the player's expectations and your expectations and the sort of table expectations and make sure everyone's on the same page kind of talk. And this was about something that comes up fairly often, and that is the concept of the called shot. In my case, the player didn't come out and say, hey, I want to have called shots, but they described a situation that was essentially a called shot. He was considering, in a combat that is about to happen, if he is fighting an ogre, could he slip around the back of the ogre and then slice through, essentially do a cut across the Achilles tendon kind of cinematic move, and then as the ogre has to bend to one knee, is kind of down, then he could do some kind of flip up and then stab down with a sword. Something he's seen in the movies. And in fact, he mentioned, well, in a movie, this might happen. So can I do that? When I see this kind of question come up on the internet about various phases of called shots, either one, people come up with, here's my system for called shots. Personally, I don't want a called shot system. I'm not interested in a called shot system. So that was not the vector that we were traveling down. Now, the other vector I see online is when people will say something like, hey, the player's asking for called shots, what do I do? You get a lot of very pithy responses. Oh, well, tell them if you do it, then the enemies do it. But that, to me, is not a very sufficient answer, because really it's not answering anything. It's really just a threat. Well, if you do that, then they'll do that. Which, sure, that may be true in the sense that you create a new mechanic that the mechanic doesn't just exist for a single character or even just the player characters, that it exists for all creatures so they can all do that. But that kind of makes it seem like the player's idea, you're not really saying why it's good or why it's not good. You're simply saying, hey, if you do it, they're going to do it to you. Do you want it done to you? So you shouldn't do it. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. My goal, I feel like, as the GM, is to help the players understand these kinds of sticky wickets questions. Sometimes I need to understand them myself. Sometimes as a table we may come together and answer them. And I should be able to explain why in terms other than just, if you do it to me, I'm going to do it to you, which again, I don't think seems fair. I tried to use a couple of analogies. I think I was successful. I don't know. It came down to at the end the player understood. But, sometimes people say they understand and they don't. So I can't speak to whether a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, he's going to have that understanding. I can only say that in how we came away from the conversation was positive. I tried to go through a couple of analogies that would speak to the kind of meta and in fiction reasoning for why these things may not work. In terms of D&D, some systems have call shot type mechanics built in. It's a totally different system. I'm playing a homebrewed version of Basic Expert, but I don't have any systems like that in place. And like I said, I don't really want them. So the first analogy I did is he had talked about movies and sort of cinematic moments. I felt like when he was running through it, it's almost like something you might see in God of War when you would go through in Kratos and you start hitting those, you get a monster down to a few hits and then you hit that kind of combo and you enter this kind of combo mode and then you would do one cut and another cut, then you'd run up the back of the big beast and slam down. And I didn't think about the moment. That might have been a good one because in God of War, you don't usually hit that on a big enemy right away. You usually have to grind them down a little bit and then they're vulnerable to such a thing. And that's pretty much how I was trying to lay it out to them. I used a couple of examples. The first one I used was Troy. I said, the movie Troy, the one with Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, and other folks. So remember at the beginning of the movie Troy, Achilles is called to the army and there's one other big guy. I think the actor's name was Nathan Jones, or is Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones he's huge and he's there and he's this one-size champion. Here comes Achilles. I took that little combat sequence and I tried to run it, and this is how it would be like in D&D. And I said, look, for all this size this big guy has, he's only got a couple of hit points. He's really he may be huge. He may have an 18 strength with a +3 modifier. He's only got a couple hit points. He's really just a normal big soldier, whereas Achilles is a hero. Round 1, Achilles, 60 feet away, jogging in. The other guy, Nathan Jones, throws a spear. Spear misses. Round 2, Achilles charging. Nathan Jones he's at 30 feet, throws a spear. I think the spear hits the shield. That might even have been a potential, we could even call that hit point loss, depending on how we wanted to do it. Shield is gone. I think in this one, the shield is gone. Forgive me if I don't have the exact sequence, but essentially, okay, 30 feet away, Nathan Jones wins initiative, throws a spear. Spear is blocked. Here comes Achilles, charges in, jumps up, hits, kills. Nathan Jones had 3, 4, 5 hit points. If we'd rolled dice behind the scenes, maybe with strength bonuses, blah, 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 maybe we give him there's a plus something for charging, does more than 3, 4, 5 hit points. Down goes Nathan Jones. Fast forward in the movie. Now Achilles is fighting Hector. Hector, multiple level fighter. Like Achilles is a multiple level fighter. There's going to be multiple rounds, all those things. And I talked about, and I think I did a video. I keep meaning to follow up on this where I tried to go over, I think I did in terms of hit points. I can't remember if I did in terms of hit points or just combat, but combat in D&D, I believe, and it's never clearly stated, and they do different things, so I know it's very loosey-goosey, and I can never say, well, they absolutely meant it to be abstract, because they don't ever say it is abstract, and they'll do things that will clearly make it seem like they don't mean it to be. But in my conception, D&D combat is abstract. You are rolling dice to attack. You're not rolling for one particular swing. You're rolling for, this is the result of 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 seconds, however many of time in the combat and whatever happens. So all those things where you're banging, and the other thing is a damage, which I think I might have done the video about, is also abstract. It is not just meat points. Every time you hit somebody, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're cutting them and they're bleeding and everything. It really is, you're wearing down their resistance. You're wearing down their ability to fend off mortal wounds. So with Achilles and Hector go toe-to-toe, it takes multiple rounds of them banging against each other, banging, banging, banging. But you can see over the course of that scene, Achilles is wearing him down until he's starting to get sloppy. He trips on the stone. He's getting backed up. And then finally, Achilles is able to do that weird thing where he spins around a bunch of times and then finally plunks it into the chest. Down goes Hector. We had the one example, hey, you're fighting against a level 0 nobody. Sure, they may be big and bulky, but they're still level 0. Now you're fighting against somebody with multiple levels. You have to do more to get them down to that point. So bringing it back to his example of, I want to run around, I want to roll around the guy, slice his Achilles, then jump on him and stab him. That's that killing blow. That still, to me, was in that 6-second window. That is the kind of thing that I give them. One of the other players pointed out, it's like, hey, when you kill somebody, you get to narrate how you did it, which is something lots of people do in their games. I do in my game. So sure, if you get down and you do that killing blow, you can absolutely narrate that as I roll around the guy, hit their Achilles, and jump up and give them a killing blow. Bam. To me, that totally fits within the 6-second window or whatever you have in the combat. But when you have something that's formidable, an ogre or just a higher level fighter, you have to wear them down. The other analogy I brought to bear was boxing, which I like to use a lot. And there is one way in which they're sort of significantly different. But when you look at boxing, we look at two boxers, they get in the ring, round 1, everyone's got good posture. Their hands are up. They're able to counter all the blows, or most of them. They're really into it. As the fight wears on, the fighters start to get tired. They're dropping their hands. They're less crisp. They're less able to get out of the way. All those glancing blows, all those things that maybe don't show up as something that you would see in a sports center highlight, but all those blows are still adding up. That to me is kind of damage. It's not necessarily that each one of these is like Rocky, where they're just the landing solid blow over and over again. All those ones that you're a little bit blocking, you're getting off your side of your hand, you're only hitting them, you're sort of hitting them glancing blows. All that stuff still adds up. That's all hit point loss. In the same way that just because you have your shield up and you get armor on, all that banging on you, it's wearing you down. And so when you get to the late rounds, hands are coming down, you're more likely to get that finishing blow. Now, where the analogy for boxing falls short, admittedly, is that you can have flash knockdowns in boxing, where you can get somebody come in round 1 fresh, the physics and everything just match up and somebody gets knocked out. D&D, at least in terms of kind of martial characters, doesn't really have that concept of the flash knockout. Even a critical hit. Maybe if you're a first level fighter and you're fighting someone that's 1 or 2 levels and you get a critical hit, you do max damage, you do double damage, that can kind of do it, but not fully. And I fully got behind. It's like, listen, I would be totally behind coming up with some kind of flash knockout kind of rule, because that I think makes sense. I think it can be really cinematic, but in terms of having a single strategy that you can run, a single tactic that's going to give you this kind of instant success. I said it's not. That's not the way. That's not the kind of the way the combat is simulated. That's not the kind of fiction I'm trying to create. And I did bring up the fact that if that was so available that it was just about get around the backside, hit the Achilles, and essentially it's game over, then that's what everybody would be doing all combat, is everyone just circling around each other trying to get their Achilles. Doesn't really work in the kind of game, the kind of fiction that I'm trying to portray. And so I use those examples, boxing, the movie Troy. I also made the point of saying in D&D, everyone's trying to hit the vital spots all the time, because that's the other thing with called shots. People say, I want to aim for the eyes. You're already aiming for the eyes. Everybody's aiming for the eyes. Everybody's aiming for the vitals. Everybody's trying to end these fights as fast and as efficiently as they can. It's not that by default a creature comes up and is just trying to hit you in your least sensitive spots. No, they're trying to take you out however they can. But just like everybody else, what is the defender doing? They're defending their vitals as much as possible. The first thing they're looking to block is someone stabbing them in the face. And of course, you get in all the other techniques and concepts of trying to aim for center mass, because that's the better chance of hitting than hitting something smaller like somebody's head or something else, right? A smaller area. So you want to aim for the body, whatever, all that stuff. But basically, everyone's trying to get the best thing they can all the time. So the idea of the called shot as a go for the eyes, go for the throat or something, you're already doing. That's already kind of baked in. And I've said this before, but I think my sweet spot for combat is 3 or 4 rounds for kind of exactly this kind of reason, on top of everything else, which is that you don't get into a spot, hopefully, where you're just stab, 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 hope for the best, where you have a lot of decisions to make. Now, the other kind of called shot that I know comes out a lot, I don't have a particular answer for. I think in the same way we can apply some of the same things I've just talked about to this kind of called shot. It might call for its own mechanic. You find it something that's useful, and that's the disarm. My player wasn't talking about I want to knock the club out of the ogre's hands. I think maybe the fact that it was an ogre probably was thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that anyway. It's not a possible thing for me. But I know that's something that comes up a lot. The evil priest has the wand. I want to knock it out of the hands. The whatever has I want to knock the sword out of the swordsman's hands. Now, on the one hand, you say, well, for some of them, especially with weapons are concerned, I would make the same argument I was just making before. Everybody's trying to do that. People are always trying to knock the sword out of your hands. People are always trying to bang your shield aside to get in a better blow. That's all kind of baked into the numbers when you're doing that. Of course, you might say, if people are always trying, well, why then doesn't it ever succeed? That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for it. I think it would be possible maybe to use something like a critical success. I think it would probably be a great tool for that. If you had players that wanted to do things like disarm, and you feel like disarm is reasonable, I think it is reasonable to a degree. I think the problem is, I think the thing we have to keep in mind, regardless of whether we're talking about things like disarming or aiming for the eyes, we look at that stuff, and on one hand we say, well, people get disarmed in movies and things in the books all the time. Indiana Jones using the whip and whipping and knocking the pistol out of somebody's hand, that happens all the time. Or someone doing the what like the Man in Black does to Inigo Montoya, and does the little thing and flipping and flicks the sword away, right? That happens all the time. Sure, but do we want it to happen all the time? People are just going to do it all the time. Everyone will end up being disarmed. If you have a critical success, if you use something on a critical, you have kind of a finite amount of time it's going to happen. 5% of the time, more or less, they're going to hit that 20, and then they could be able to narrate. Maybe they could say, hey, instead of doing double damage, you could do a disarm. You could do something else. You could maybe, you could add some kind of conditional effect for a round or two. So you get to that thing where I want to blind him. Well, you can't permanently blind him. But if you get that critical attack and success, instead of doing 12 points of damage, maybe you can do 6 points of damage, and their blind save versus death ends kind of thing. I think that would be, I just kind of half-baked, just came up with it here in the moment, just talking about, but maybe that would be an interesting thing. I don't want to get into the weeds on the details. I want to try to wrap this up. I'm recording this on Christmas Eve. I kind of had the house to myself, so I thought this is too good to be true. Got to record, so I don't want to get too far in the weeds. I think ultimately, to get back to my central point, one, just generally, when these issues come up with your players, be generous with your thought processes. Yes, I could have just shut the player down and said, nope, no called shots in the game, sorry. Or, nope, because if you do it, enemies are going to do it. And do you want enemies to do it to you? Could have done that too. I didn't. I think it's important, and I think it's useful for the players. One, it just makes them feel like they've been heard. It makes it feel like, hey, I'm not crazy. You're not trying to punish me. I didn't somehow break a taboo. I have a genuine question. So give it a genuine, thoughtful answer. And I also think it's educational. Who knows? This person, this is their kind of their first D&D. I think that maybe their first role-playing type game. A couple of years from now, maybe they're running games on their own, and this same question comes up with one of their players, and this will be something they can pull back to and say, you know, when this came up when I was a player, this is what I was told, and maybe I agree with it, and that's how I run it, or I have my own take on it, and that's that. But they have something. It adds to their knowledge of the game. It's not just you're shutting you down. And it's something that as a parent with my daughter who's 7, this comes up quite a bit just in just life things. It's very easy to look at her when she has a question or something, especially about something that we don't want her to do, and just say, no, don't do that. Don't do it. Why? Because I said so. But it's frustrating for her, and it doesn't really teach her anything about life or anything. Whereas if we can sit down as parents and talk to her about it and explain about it, one, it forces us to have an explanation. Because if you get down to it and your player has some kind of request and you have no good reason other than, well, they're going to do it to you, well, then maybe you should rethink it. Maybe you are just jumping a little too fast on the no train, and you should kind of consider a little more. Really, why aren't I allowing this thing? Because it does kind of make sense. And if the only barrier is the fact that enemies might do it too, maybe that's not sufficient. Maybe I need to think about it more. And then, of course, if you have thought it through and you do have reasons, then allowing your players to see those reasons is only going to make it easier for them to accept the overall decision. They're going to buy into it. They're not going to keep having it in their brains that it's unfair or something where it may can't come up again. It's certainly going to stave off any kind of frustration, and it's going to give them a better understanding of the game, regardless of how long you've been playing. I'm always learning new things about the game and different techniques and different things, so I can always learn. And certainly if you're playing with players who are less experienced than you, this shows them that experience in a way that they can pass on. It's that teachable moment. So embrace the teachable moment. If you do have questions come about called shots, think about why you like them or why you don't like them, or why you like them in your game or don't want them in your game. Those are the reasons that I gave. I think the disarm kind of factor is a little bit different because I'm intrigued by it. It's something you can do every once in a while, but not something you're doing all the time. And I think the other kinds of called shot things are those things that, like the other player actually mentioned, I didn't even get to, which is when you kill a creature, you really get to define how you do it. So when you want that heroic moment, when you down the creature, you get it. Maybe we could extend that more. Maybe that could be another thing. On a critical hit, you get to do some more kind of narration about it. Maybe it could be something when you bloody a creature, there's a couple of chances to kind of do a moment. I'm not sure. There could be some ways to play it with it, because I think it seems clear that giving those players those kind of powerful moments where they can really say what they're doing in an effective way can be really interesting to them and really bring them in the game. At the same time, we obviously want to make sure that they're getting all the advantages and everything that they deserve, but they're not just pushing it, right? Like, oh, I hit for 1 damage, but I had rolled behind and sliced their Achilles, so even though I didn't do 1 damage and all this and that, no, he's down, and now it's just a killing blow away, right? All right, coup de grace, because he's down on the knee. Time out, right? Slow down. That's all I got. If you like these videos, give them a thumbs up. That would help me out quite a bit. If you found yourself in here and you hadn't seen me before, this is kind of what I do. I stream all the time. I hadn't posted any of these videos lately. Probably gonna do more of these as I have time between now and the holidays, and of course going forward as time allows. If you subscribe, you'll get notified. All this stuff. I don't pester people too much. Try to be kind of active in the community tab, but not too much. You get pinged for those. Anyway, you'll just kind of see what's going on over here. If you do watch this in the next day or so, a couple days, have a happy Yule, have a happy New Year. Otherwise, game on, and I'll talk to you later.
Hexed.